Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with me through that break. If you are just tuning in our first segment, we did a little deep dive into the players that were let walk after the franchise tag deadline in the NFL, what that might mean for their teams and their position groups as a whole as we enter free agency. We, in our second segment, just finished talking about the NBA MVP race, the leaders, why they have a case, and who I think is going to win it. In this third segment, like I was talking about, we are going to answer the question, is this the end of amateurism in college sports? We're going to talk about what is going on with the NCAA halfway behind closed doors, how they're kind of being bullied and pushed around by some of their conferences. But before we get into that, remember that if you want to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, leave a tip or donation. Your message will pop up on the bottom of the screen. We'll have a little discussion about what you said for everyone that is watching to see. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. We appreciate you donating, but let's get right into it. Is this the end of amateurism? And specifically, and more specifically, I guess, is this the end of the NCAA? The NCAA, for just about 30 years now, has been slowly losing its grip on college sports. Now, it was a bunch of small things that have turned into an avalanche of unimaginable proportions coming at the NCAA, threatening to bury it forever. You take a look at the strong arming, especially in football, that the Big Ten and the SEC have been doing. You take a look. We talked about this when it first came out. The kind of PR look that it has when the SEC and the Big Ten basically demand that we get special treatment. I guess the other power conferences can get a little bit of that too. In that 14-team playoff proposal, with them getting 3 spots and the other 2 power conferences getting 2, the original proposal was for them to get 4 each. And the NCAA compromised by making it 3. I think the original proposal from them that they were trying to force on the NCAA was each of them get 4, the ACC and Big 12 each get 1, and the in the group of 5 gets 1 as well. Not really a great look for the NCAA having to kind of bow down to them like that. It's kind of scary a little bit. I personally can't remember a time when a sports organization as big as the NCAA feels like it's on the verge of collapse. And a lot of this has to do with the absolute wave of change that has come with the landmark ruling about NIL and the transfer portal being such a huge part of the game out of nowhere, really. The NIL ruling has, I guess, made it so that schools can kind of treat their sports like a business. Treat these guys more like guys. They can pay them now. And actually, in Dartmouth yesterday, the basketball team decided to unionize. It was ruled by the board up in Massachusetts that they were employees. They were able to get paid. They were employees there. They were employed by the school, and that could be a big decision. Now, nothing's finalized. They just voted to start a union. Nothing has been put into place. There's still countersuits that have been done, that can be done about this, but it kind of opens the door a little bit, cracks it open even more. The big ruling, the NCAA continues to lose in court over NIL. They're no longer allowed to suspend people over NIL mishandlings, with the court case with Tennessee and Virginia that they lost recently. It's really crumbling down very quickly. And The Athletic put out a very nice article, a really well put together piece chronicling the kind of the fall of the NCAA. It kind of, to me, feels like a country is falling when I'm looking at the NCAA. I'm trying to picture what it's going to be like. I in my mind honestly cannot fathom what the landscape of college sports will look like without the NCAA. And the way that it's going, I feel like the NCAA won't be around much longer. But like I was saying, the Athletic put out this really nice piece, kind of chronicling the timeline of the NCAA slowly losing its power, and it goes all the way back to about 30 years ago when they suspended when they suspended Jerry Tarkenton for 2 seasons at UNLV, and he sued and won. Since then, the NCAA, this was in 1977, since then the NCAA's amount of investigations has dropped drastically from 5.4 to 2.2. You take a look. After that, they continue to lose in Supreme Courts. They lost for the first time in 1984, and they've lost a bunch more times in this recent decade. Obviously, the NIL ruling being the most crucial one. But the big thing with the NCAA has always been amateurism, and if they can pay these players. And I have no problem with that. I want to start this off with I have no problem with players getting paid for participating. I think if they wanted to get sponsorships or boosters brought them to the school by getting paid, that was already happening. Having it happen over the table, I feel, is better. It might be different, but it really isn't. A lot of this stuff was already happening behind closed doors. Having it out in the open, I feel like, can help a lot. It might be the end of what we know as amateurism, but amateurism was made up by the NCAA. The NCAA created that. It was an excellent marketing ploy by their former president. I don't have his name in front of me. They created the term amateurism so that they didn't have to pay these athletes. This isn't the first time a debate like NIL has happened before. Should we pay the players? And the NCAA was able to skirt around it by creating this rule of amateurism. It's really fascinating how that works, how that was created and how that was pushed out. I don't have an article for that, but I did read that a couple years ago. So go look at that. Do some research into that. It's very, very fascinating to see that the NCAA is on a fast path to the ground. And I'm more curious what the college landscape is going to look like afterwards, because I know college football will survive. College football makes enough money on its own. TV broadcasters are going to want to keep broadcasting that. College basketball, at least men's college basketball, that will survive. Again, they make too much money. Broadcasting deals are great over there. But when we get to the non-revenue sports, even a sport like women's basketball, a sport that I am 90% sure could survive the fall of the NCAA, I'm not 100% sure about that. There's a lot that goes into women's college basketball, but it's not quite as popular as those two sports, and it's not there's no guarantee that it would survive the fall. And sports like swim and dive or lacrosse or even softball or baseball maybe might not survive the fall of the NCAA. These sports that are so scarcely nationally televised, it's not great for these sports and these athletes. Now, my best guess of what's going to happen is the NIL is going to come around. They're going to not quite, they're not going to pay every player. The way that I read NIL and the way that I would support NIL is allow these players to get endorsements. It's not like you're giving them a salary. It's not like you're taking away these opportunities that these guys, these players, these athletes have earned. Let them do signings. Let them get paid to show up to events. Let them do commercials and get paid to do that stuff. But when it comes to giving them a salary, that's a little bit different. And that's the kind of stuff that they're trying to figure out right now with NIL. That's the stuff that Dartmouth basketball just kind of pushed into the forefront when they unionized yesterday. Should they be salaried employees? Is this how we should be treating our college players? Should college sports be treated as a business instead of a student athlete kind of organization? I think right now the SEC, at least college football, at the very least, is going to break away from the NCAA. Do I think the NCAA can survive college football going away and creating their own league? I do. I do think they can survive that, but I wouldn't be shocked if something like that happened, and then slowly that's just the first step. If college football goes with the SEC and the Big Ten, and quite honestly, they'd probably take a bunch of schools from all the power conferences. So let's just assume that they take all the power conferences in football, and the NCAA is left with the Group of Five and the FCS. The NCAA can survive that. They'll just make the Group of Five the Power Five, and the FCS will disappear and be swallowed into the FBS, is most likely what would happen. But the interesting part about that is sports outside of football, sports like basketball, how that would react would the SEC only take football, or would they and keep the rest in basketball? How would that relationship stay? It's one of those things that we're about to hit a crossroads with this, and I don't think the landscape of college sports is ever going to be this unified again. This era this era of unification in college sports is coming to an end, in my opinion, unless something drastic changes. NIL and the transfer portal has made it more into a professional league than it ever has before. These players are practically free agents. You can give them basically contracts to go to other schools and play sports for you. It's really interesting, the turn that it has made. But heading into our fourth and final segment, we are going to break down some of the massive trades that have been going on in the NHL, with the trade deadline rapidly approaching just 2 days from now. On Friday, there were a bunch of big trades made today and last night. We are going to break all those down, so stick around. We will be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.